We are continuing on Masechet Succah, and we are on Daf Zayin Amud Bet, 8 lines up from the bottom of the Amud. Today's Amud is being learned as a Zchut Refuah Shelema for Rachel Simcha Bat Naid, for Nisim Bat Ben Miriam, and for Esther Bracha Bat Chaya, who has returned to a critical condition, and we all daven that she should have full recovery. Refuah Shelema, Amen. This week's Limud of the community has been dedicated graciously by the Shea family, by Dayan family, by Kohen families. Be an ultimate zchut for all their mishpachot, B'ezrat Hashem, Amen. So we started a Gemara, and we basically with a warning that this is going to be one of the mathematical amudim of the dapim of Shas. Much has been written on this, together with the Sugya at the beginning of Masechet Eruvin and Daf Yudalet, which is really the sister Gemara to this Sugya over here. I was asked to quickly go through what we learned as a review, words of review, before we go on, because we left in the middle of the Sugya. So we started with a memra of Rabbi Yochanan, which became like a Midrash Pliyah. Gemara started scratching our heads, trying to understand how exactly this should make sense. Rabbi Yochanan said that the minimum amount of a round sukkah, that's kasher, which we mentioned, we don't paskin like acherim, like Rabbi Meir, who holds a round sukkah is pasul. So Rabbi Yochanan says the minimum size is a size of sukkah that you could sit 24 people around it. That's the minimum. The Gemara says, wait a second, this is very strange, because the greatest minimum amount of sukkah that we have had in our journey through the Shitot of Tanaim is Rebbe, and Rebbe requires only 4 by 4 of a square, which would be much smaller than a circle with a circumference of 24 amot. The Gemara is under the impression that every person takes 1 amma of width to sit, so therefore 24 people is 24 amot of the circumference of the sukkah. So says the Gemara, we'll just quickly read through this, and feel free, this is going to be part of the Chazara. You could, if something is unclear, you can ask questions. Says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yochanan Sukkah Asya Kivshan. If it's a round sukkah, Im yesh be'kafah kedei leshev b'kafdalet b'rei adam keshera. If you have enough for 24 people to sit, is kasher. Ve'im lav psulaf. If not, it's going to be pasul. Come on. What is this? He has to follow. Rabbi Yochanan is an Amorah. He can't fabricate his own shita like a Tana. Even though that Tosafot in one place in Shas says Rabbi Yochanan Tanahu Upalik, but generally speaking, we don't say that. Even by Rav, in such a situation, we would not say that. So says the Gemara, it should be following someone. And the greatest shiur that we could have is Kerebi. The Amar, Korsukashin Ba'arba Amot al Arba Amot Psula. That you need a minimum of 4 amot by 4 amot. So the Gemara says, wait a second. Michti gavra ba'am yativ. If we assume that a person takes up an amma to sit, and we also know the number of pi, which generally speaking, even though that Tosafot in that sugya, as we mentioned yesterday, in Eruvin Daf Yudalet, the Tosafot there and Rambam over here, when he paskins this halacha, they understand that we're talking about 3 plus. They knew the number of pi, but the Gemara, for making the simplistic discussion of getting to the bottom line, we assume a ratio of 3:1. So if we know that 24 amot of circumference is needed, we could figure out the diameter of that sukkah. And the diameter of the sukkah, which circumference is 24, would be 1/3 of that, would be 8. That's massive. That's much bigger. So therefore, says the Gemara, if you have a requirement of a space of 4 amot, not 8, because that's what Rebbe requires, 4 amot to have a space, a diameter of 4 would give you a circumference of 12. So why do you need 2?
No, it goes by the diameter, which is, if it's the outer circle, be what?
Well, we're not in the outer inner yet, right? The simple understanding of the beginning of the Gemara is if you have a diameter of 4, which is the required space based on Rebbe says 4, so then the circumference of that circle is going to be 12. So Gemara says basically, but Tres Harsagi, 12 should be sufficient. Where do you get 24? It's double the size. No, not much bigger than double the size maybe, but it's double the circumference. It's a much bigger space. Says Gemara, no, Hali mili be'igula. That's only with a circle. Circle, the widest area of it is the diameter, which is 4. You don't need 1 millimeter of 4 amot of space. Rebbe says it has to be 4 by 4. So therefore, the ribua is going to be much bigger, which would be basically saying that if Rebbe requires this, this would not be enough, because if you put this inside this, if this is 4, then you'll end up with a much smaller area. The circle that fits into the square is missing all of these edges over here. So you won't have enough, because it's not just sufficient to have 4 amot of diameter, because then you'll end up with this type of circle, and Rebbe required the minimum of this type of a square. So you can visibly see that this is much smaller. That's of course not going to be enough, right? Aval bribua bayatfe. The Gemara says, okay, fine, that's easy. We could do this. How much more is it going to be? In other words, we understand that this piece is missing, so we're going to, instead of doing this type of circle, we're going to do this type of circle, which fits, according to Maharsha, to make very complicated things very easy. According to Maharsha, there is a much deeper discussion going on beneath the surface of this back and forth. The discussion is, are you talking about shetach, that, if you have 16 square amot, that's sufficient? Or are you talking about a reality that we require whatever shape of sukkah you have to be able to fit a cubicle of 4 by 4 amot? A square of 4 by 4 should fit into whatever shape it is that you want to talk about. And that's the answer of the Gemara in this maskana of the Suggah. According to the Maharsha, this answers a lot of questions of the Rashash and other Achronim who have very strong questions on different parts of the back and forth over here of both the Gemara and the Rishonim. So says the Gemara, Michdi kama meruba yoter al haigul. How much more do you have in the corners of the ribua, of the square, than the circle fitting inside of it? So Revia, it's easy. It's 1/4. In other words, what he's saying over here is by circumference, if you have the simplified pi being 3 in ratio, so of course if you have the square, which is 4 by 4, if this would be 1 by 1, right? So the circumference of this would be, not circumference, but the area on the outside, which we'll call it what?
Perimeter.
The perimeter of this would be 4, and the circumference of this would be 3. So it's 1/4 more, right? When you talk about the contrast of the perimeter of a square versus the circumference of a circle, it would be 1:4, given that the diameter of the circle is the same number as the sides of your square. So says the Gemara, it's revia, it's 1/4. So beshivsar sagi. If you have a circumference of 16, that should be enough, because you have 12, right? Add another 1/4 to it, and you'll have now 16, just like the 16 is the perimeter of this, it will be 16. If you have a circle that is 16, is a bigger shetach, is a bigger subtotal of space than 16 square of a sukkah of Rebbe, right? which is completely true, by the way, right? In mathematics, it's completely true. So this is where the Maharsha says, the Gemara is scratching its head saying, wait, you're talking about space. So if I give you even a bigger space, the circumference of the sukkah would be 16. That's a much bigger space than 16 square amot that you would need according to Rebbe. So, chalas, why do you need 24 on circumference? Says the Gemara, again, according to the Maharsha, this is where the Gemara switches the whole thing. So you're correct, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about fitting Rebbe's sukkah in this square, which would be this picture over here. So says the Gemara, in other words, for those who don't have the visual, we're talking about a case that you have a 4x4 square and you draw a circle around it on the outside, not in the inside that we've been speaking about so far. So says the Gemara, that's only a circle that fits inside a square. But if you require, and we do require, the ribua of Rebbe, that square sukkah 4x4 of Rebbe, to fit completely inside an igul, that's the minimum amount that Rabbi Yochanan is talking about. For a circle, it will be a minimum that would fit the complete 4x4 square sukkah of Rebbe inside of it. So it's a square coming out of a circle. Bayatefin, and you need much more for that. So that's where the 24 comes from, says the Gemara. Gemara says, really? Let's do the math, right? That's not correct. And the Gemara says, Mishum morasha de karneta. It's because of the corners that you can't fit. Here, these corners we're talking about, right? These corners don't fit, so therefore we need an outer circle around it, which would be this picture number 4, right? So the Gemara says, Michti kol ameta beribua amta veterechum shiba alachsona. Let's do the math, right? Whenever you have a ribua, the ratio of the alachson, the diagonal between the corners, would be, for every measurement of amma, would be 0.4 more, to make it more modernized, right? With 0.4 more. So if you have 4 of them, you would have 1.6 more, right? To say it in a way that it's not confusing like yesterday, right? So it would be 0.6 or 3/5, the way the Gemara is going to say it. So therefore by 4 you have to add 1.6, which would be 5.6 or 5 3/5, right? That is the number. So now multiple this by 3 and you'll have almost 17. You'll have 16.8, which would be the number of your circumference of this new bigger encompassing circle around the sukkah of Rebbe, quote unquote. Says the Gemara, so 24 is way off the chart. You still don't get 24, you get 16.8. Shipsar nechi chumsha saga, it should be 17 minus 0.2. So that's 16.8. Well, says, that's not a big deal, lodak. He wasn't so specific about the number, right? Rashi says the bigger the better. I think maybe it's plausible to say in Rashi that when you have a circle, it's not like you have like a perfect circle, especially if it's a big sukkah, and you're from the inside, everything looks round, right? And you could be off by a little bit. It's much easier to measure a square sukkah than something that's round. So you make it a little bigger to make sure the bigger the better. But the Gemara says, fine, that you could say by a little bit, by 1 number, 2 numbers maybe, to make sure that you're correct. But you're talking over here about 7 numbers off. That's not, that for sure, some plus. That for sure is not going to be lodak. Can we say that by a lot? No, we can't. So the Gemara says, right? He's saying, talking to the author of the Gemara, I have a simple solution to this whole thing. Your assumption that a person sits in 1 amma takes up an amma, is a mistake. A person only takes, after diet, only 2/3 of an amma, right? So therefore, that fixes up the whole thing, because 24 people, which we thought is going to be 24 amot, multiplied by 2/3, 2/3 of 24 would be exactly 16. That's amazing. Right? By the way, this is what the Rashash says. The Rashash over here says, wait a second, why does the Gemara reject this in just a second? The Gemara is going to throw this out. Rashash says, this is amazing. You just told me literally half a second ago that a sukkah that has a circumference of 16 is amazing, right? And you were scratching your head, why do you need 24 when 16 is there? So I got you 16 over here. Right? And he just leaves it as something a bomb kasha. But according to the Maharsha that we said, the question doesn't even start, because the Gemara answered already that we need, according to Rabbi Yochanan, the square of Rebbe coming completely out of the sukkah, of round sukkah of Rabbi Yochanan. So therefore it can't be 16. It's going to be minimum of 16.8. And that's what the Gemara answers. The Gemara says, wait a second. So therefore, it's going to be 16 needed in circumference of the sukkah, and you could fit 24 people, skinny people, inside the 16 amot. So the Gemara says, "Anan shifsar nechichum shabayinan." That's not good enough. We need 16.8. Lodak. The Gemara says, "Oh, that's already 0.8." That you could say easily lodak, right? I says, no, you can't, because you're not listening to yourself. You're making Rabbi Yochanan be mekel. It's pasul. You could say lodak when he is more machmir. You can't say lodak, more mekel. In other words, if you say the minimum amount of kosher sukkah, which is this, is 16.8, any millimeter less than that is going to be pasul. So you can't say, oh, I'm going to round it up to say 16. You could round it up to 17. You can't round it up lekula. Anything smaller than that. So that's not possible at all. Impossible. Lodak, you cannot say emor damrinan. Lodak lechumra. You can only say it lechumra. Lekula mi amrinan. Can you say lodak lekula? Of course not. So that's rejected completely. So Gemara says, Amar le Rav Asi le Rav Ashi. Gemara says, no, let's go back to our original thing. Every person, you don't have to be on diet. Every person takes a full amma. 24 people means 24 amot. But you know what it is? If the people who are sitting here, I want to ruin the people who are sitting over here, every person taking an amma, right? Rabbi Yochanan is not counting the outer circle of them. He's saying the circle that would be created by them in the inside, like this. That would be. So you have a person sitting here, a person sitting here, and this diameter that we drew, a person is sitting here, a person is sitting here, right? So this is one amma over here, and this is one amma over here, right? Which would be, we said it's 8, right? If it's 24 on the outside, it would be 8 in the inside, right? Now that you take these two people, 2 amot off, what do you have? A diameter of 6. Which would give you a circumference of 6 times 3, 18. So that says Rabbi Asi, that's the pshat. The pshat is, Rabbi Yochanan says you need to be able to sit 24 people on the outer circle of the sukkah, which inside their circle of sitting would be only a diameter of 6, not 8. So says the Gemara. He doesn't. He discounted the place that people are actually sitting, which is this inside these 2 circles over here in the picture, and therefore it's going to be 18. Gemara says, "What? That's still off, right? That's 1 plus off, because we need only almost 17, right? 16.8. Are you saying 18? Gemara says that's fine. That's a little bit. That's a very small thing of error, and he was more machmir to make sure that you get what you need inside, and that's the maskana of the Gemara as far as we're concerned over here. Says the Gemara, This is an addition. The chumrah, as Rashi said, the bigger the better. You want to, you want to minimize the margin of error. So you add one number there, 1.2, and that would be sufficient. Says the Gemara, Rabbanan de Kisri, ve'amri le dayani de Kisri, the city of Kesari or Kisri, the Dayanim, the Rabbanim of Kisri said, Igula de nafik mikor rivua, they had a cheshbon, a different type of cheshbon. Said, when you take a circle out of a square, it's going to be 1/4 more, that's agreeable, as we explained, right? The chiddush of Rabbanim de Kisri is the following, which everybody is bothered with. The Tosafot, this massive Tosafot that you see on Daf Chet Amud Bet, spends a lot of time trying to explain this, what exactly it means, different calculations, the Lagaon and others. But here is Ribu'a de nafak migo ikula palga. But a square that comes out of a circle, it's addition of 50% on the outsides. These four areas are going to be 50% addition to this. So therefore, you would need to take 50% off of the 24, and therefore it would be amazing. It would give you exactly the same number that you would need. It would be Esrim va'arba on the outside would give you exactly what you need. The Gemara says, but that's not true. If you do a circle around it, we already measured this. The measurement is now 50% more, is 0.8 more. Instead of being 16, it's now 16.8. And therefore, the Gemara says, Velohi, it's not true. We see it's evident to the eye that it would not be that much more. It's only a 0.8 more on the circumference in that way. So therefore, the Gemara rejects it. Again, the understanding of this Dayana de Kitzri is something very complicated and very interesting to go through this Tosafot on your own times, but that's for a different time. Says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Levi, Mishum Rabbi Meir. Shte sukot shel yotzrim, zu lifnim mizu, hapnimit eina sukkah, vechayevet b'mezuzah. The way the potters of back in the time of Chazal, the way they ran their business was they had their house, their living space, and their storefront, so to speak, together. This was a hut, basically. It had walls, and it was covered with schach, basically. And they actually lived during the course of the year here. This was their living space and storage also. So whatever pottery that they wanted to store was in this back sukkah. And the front, which also was considered a sukkah with walls and schach on top, was their store and where they actually made the pottery. Right? This is how it was. Now the Gemara says, is this, either of this is a kasher for sukkah? Now, we're going to have in the next daf many cases of mamash sukkah, that if you looked at it, a picture, if I take a picture and showed you that this is a sukkah. But it was not used for sukkah. It was used for shades for your animal, or for goyim, or for women, or for tzniut, or for potters, right? Like this case. So we want to know if these sukkot that are not built for sukkah, are they kasher or not? Now Rashi over here brings immediately the next Mishnah, which you're going to have. You're going to start on Daf Tet Amud Aleph, the top of the Amud. Machloket Bet Hillel and Bet Shammai, whether or not you need a sukkah that's built lishma, right? In other words, in order for a sukkah to be kasher, you have to say Hashem Yichud Kutsha B'Richu and put your shtreimel and gartel and then build the sukkah, or something that a goy built, so long as it is made for shade, not for any other purpose, would be still kasher. And Bet Hillel says you don't need sukkah lishma. Sukkah that was built for shade is fine. Right? Any hut that was built for shade and it has the parameters of a kosher sukkah is kasher. So hence, the question over here, both of these should be really kasher, right? And the Gemara is going to say that this back one is not kasher. Why is it not kasher? Because even Bet Hillel, says the Gemara, who says you don't have to build a sukkah lishma, but when you live in it, in Chag HaSukkot, it should be evident that you're living in it l'shem mitzvat sukkah. That much we need. If this is your living space of the entire year, and now just come in Chag HaSukkot and you're still living there, you didn't move out, that's not evident that you're living there for. So you live here the whole year. So therefore it's pasul. But if he moves his couch and bed outside in his store, which he doesn't live in normally during the course of the year, that would be kasher. Right? Once we're at it, we're going to also speak about halachot of mezuzah. Which one of these two lives mezuzah? He lives here during the course of the year, right? So let's learn this together. Amar Reb Levi, Mishum Rabbi Meir, Shte sukkot shel yotzrim zo lifnim mizu, hapnimit ena sukkah. The inner one is not sukkah, it's pasul. Vechayevet b'mezuzah, and you also need mezuzah. Why? Because this is your living space, this is your house. The fact that you have schach on top doesn't make a difference, right? This is considered your sukkah, so you put your mezuzah over here on the wall, and that's an obligation. But the outside, the outer one, is a kasher sukkah. You could live in it during Chag HaSukkot, because again, it is pretty evident that you moved your bed here to your store. That means you're doing it l'shem sukkah. Uptura min ha-mezuzah. And it is patur from mezuzah because that's not a living space. So says the Gemara, in Ilchot Mezuzah, right, in Masechet Yuma Daf Yud Aleph, we have a concept of bet shar. That means if you have a house, and on the outer part, in the entrance of the house, you have a room, which is a room prior to entrance of the house itself, it's a bet shar. And bet shar, if it has enough of a size of 36 feet square, basically 4 by 4 amod, is chayav b'mezuzah. So Mara says, okay, I understand this is not a house, but it should be a bet shar to the house. Well, you missed the Gemara in Yuma. Mara says, no, I didn't miss it. There, you need a kavua house. But titchayev b'mezuzah mishum because of bet shar, says the Gemara, mishum de lo kavia. The reason that's not not chayav b'mezuzah is because it's not kavua. It's not considered a permanent dwelling. It's not a kavua place for living, and therefore it's going to be patur, right? Says the Gemara. Let's at least start the next piece over here as well. Tanu Rabbanan, Ganbach Sukkot Goyim, Sukkah of Ganbach is going to be kasher. Now again, this is requirement of the machloket later on of Bet Hillel Bet Shammai. We are of course following the halacha ke Bet Hillel. So we learned that these 4 sukkot, that the abbreviation makes Ganbach, and you want to remember that, right? Sukkot Goyim is for the Gimel, Nashim is for the Nun, Behema for the Bet, and Sukkot Kutim, right? Which here we're assuming the Kutim are not Lav mi b'nei Yisrael Hema. So all of that is going to be kasher. And then the Gemara adds a 5th item. Sukkah mikol makom. Sukkah mikol makom is kasher. Any sukkah. Now, of course, we know not every sukkah is kasher. So what is this sukkah mikol makom? We have to discuss it. So says the Gemara, ubilvat shtehe mesuchechet keilchata. You, of course, have a requirement that you should have a proper schach, proper ceiling on the top. So says the Gemara, my keilchata. What's a proper ceiling? What's the sukkah schach keilchata? Amar Rav Chisda, vehu she'asa'ah letzel. We're talking about a case that you made the ceiling for tzel. Not for rain, it's made for providing shade. That's fine, very good. So sukkah mikol makom, what is that? What is sukkah mikol makom? Any sukkah. La'atuyeh mai, it's coming to add what? This 5th item. La'atuyeh sukkat rakbash. is not adding only one case, he's adding 4 more cases of Sukkah, right? And abbreviation of which is Rakbash. What's Rakbash? The Tanu Rabbanan, another Braita. Look at this. This Braita is going to be identical with the Braita that we just had. In other words, our Braita says Sukkot Ganbach plus Rakbash, right? This Braita is going to say Rakbash plus Ganbach, right? So it ends up in halakha to be identical, but there's a sharp difference, which we're going to discuss tomorrow. But the enumeration of this Rakbash is the following. Sukkot Rakbash, which means Sukkot Ro'im, shepherds, right? When you're shepherding the flock, well, you're going to sit under the sun. No, you make a hut for yourself, a sukkah. Right? It's not meant for living, but you're there during the day, spending some time there to save yourself from the sun. Sukkot Kayatzim, right? Which is people who would be watching the gardens, the fruits, right? That is Shomrei Ktziot Hashtuchin Besadeh Leyabesh. You would cut off your figs and other things that need to be dried up, and you put them there to dry in the sun. You don't want yourself to dry in the sun, so you make yourself a sukkah, watching them from animals coming and attacking and eating them. Sukkot Burganin. Burganin are people who would keep the city safe, the watchers of the city, right? They would be on the outer skirts of town, watching what happens around in the surrounding of the city, and that's Burganin. Again, they need shelter during the day, and that's their shelter. And Sukkot Shomrei Perot, and in the gardens themselves, there would be Shomrei Perot that would be watching them. That's your Rakbash, and then that Braita itself says, Sukkah Mikol Makom, any Sukkah. So what's the Sukkah Mikol Makom of in this second Braita? And also the Sukkah, the Braita says, it has to be Mesuchechet Ki'ilchata, you should have proper sealing. My kilchata, what's kilchata? Same thing, identical. Amar Rokista Vilsha Asal Lesel. You made it for Tzel. Gemara says, so what's Sukkah Mikol Makom over here in this second Braita? Sukkah Mikol Makom Le'atuye Mai, Le'atuye Sukkot Ganbach. It's coming to add Sukkot Ganbach. So both of the Braitas are saying the same thing in the opposite order. And the difference, of course, is which one is more kasher. One of them says, this is for sure kasher, and not only this, even this. And the other one says, no, this is kasher for sure, but not only this, also this. So that we have to discuss still, but that's where we're going to stop for today, and Bezrat Hashem will continue this in the days to come. Chazaku Baruch.